everybody!
We're here to do What We Read.
That's right.
I was like, I almost forgot what we were going to do.
Magnificent shocker. I've been reading.
It is a shocker, isn't it?
And she's been, well,
I think
of
it's
course,
this
reading.
weather, because it's now
I think it's this
slowly
year.
turning towards Mackie's like
That is true, though.
preferred weather.
I think I have been all summered out, and
you know,
now I am.
It's the cool winds of fall.
Yeah.
Just wafting in his face that make
true.
him feel better.
I do feel much better when it's gloomy and cold. So
which it has been.
Which it has been
for like
so.
the last couple of
days,
weeks, right? No, even weeks.
Sure.
Anyway, this is going to be a little bit longer than usual because there's a lot of catching up that we need to do. And by we, I mean me. I was telling Mackie that I really wanted to get my thoughts on
I'm just here
all
for
these
the food. Sorry. Ever after anyone? Just me? Okay, cool.
I really wanted to get you guys all of my thoughts on all of these books so that we were slowly catching up to what I'm currently reading, like in this particular month or in the last 2 weeks.
Yep.
So that is what we're going to attempt to do. So this first half for me is going to be split into two parts. There is going to be a contemporary part, and then there's going to be a historical romance part.
Sure.
So we're going to start with the historical romance part. The first book that I'm going to talk about is Destiny's Embrace, which is by Beverly Jenkins, and it's part of her Destiny series. It is unusual for me to be including a book like that one because it's an American historical romance. So the setting is in the United States. It's almost a Western because it's also set at a ranch, which is not usually something that I gravitate towards.
Almost a Western sounds like a great book, though.
Almost a Western. Anyway, the book itself is about a young woman named Mariah, and she ends up traveling all the way west to work sort of as a, I guess, house help for a man named Logan Yates. I want to say his last name is.
Sure.
I hope I remember that correctly. Anyway, obviously there is a love story in there somewhere because why would it be historical romance otherwise? I was really looking forward to trying my first Beverly Jenkins book because I had heard so much about her as an author, and I know a lot of people who really enjoy her work. And I'm so happy to say that this one was definitely a hit with me. I just liked the way that she wrote all this like romantic tension between our couple, even though I will say like it was a little hard on me sometimes to like suspend my disbelief about the fact that they've known each other like what? I think it was like a week and a half or maybe less than a week. That was a little bit harder for me to like get over because then they immediately decided they are the one for each other. But anyway, I digress. I really enjoyed it. I actually liked the ranch setting, which is unusual to me.
Well,
I think it helps that the ranch itself is like a family-run ranch, so there are
oh, no,
brothers,
yeah, that'll
there's
be
like
their
stepmom. It was just a delight to
Sounds
get
like...
to, yeah, it was a delight to get to know all those characters and to just see them interacting with each other. And it was even better when Mariah showed up and sort of ingratiated herself with the entire family. So it was very fun. The banter was really great. I still really enjoyed the romance, even though, again, suspension of disbelief was a little bit tough for me. I will definitely be reading the rest of the series. I actually own the next 2 books as well, so I'm hoping to read those soon because they're about Logan's brothers and I can't wait. So I'm very pleased that my first Beverly Jenkins experience was a really good one, and I'm looking forward to reading more of her work. The next historical romance that I'm going to be talking about is also by an author that's new to me, and that's Lenora Bell. The title of the book is How the Duke Was Won, and it's the first, I want to say, in the Disgraceful Dukes series.
That's right.
So this book is basically like The Bachelor. Because what happens in the book is that James, he's the Duke of Harlan, and he needs a bride for business arrangement of sorts. So he basically just wants someone that he can parade around as his wife and that he is guaranteed not to fall in love with. And so he makes up a list of all these eligible ladies, and there are 4 of them, and he invites them to come to his estate so that he can meet them and then decide which one of them he is meant to, you know, wed. One of the brides, she can't go because of some other external circumstances, and so it ends up being like her half-sister who poses as her, goes to like goes to this duke's place and like, you know, tries to win his hand for her half-sister. It's a lot like The Bachelor in terms of setup because like he gets his pick of the ladies. He gets to spend all this time with them. There are sort of like different, they're not really tests, but they're like different situations that they're put in where he gets to see like how they'd react, what they would do, and as much as he tries to insist that he's not gonna fall in love, he obviously ends up developing feelings for our main heroine, Charlene. I think her name is Charlene. Drama ensues. I really enjoyed my introduction to Lenora Bell. This is the kind of historical romance that I would turn towards in the past, and even now, where it's a little bit lighter on the drama and the romance and the feels compared to a lot of the other ones I've read. I liked the dynamic between our hero and heroine. I thought their romance felt really believable, even though, again, it's a very short span of days when they get to know each other and like decide like, oh, I have feelings for you, which is fine. Like you know what, I literally will take that as it comes for these kinds of things. So I definitely enjoyed my introduction to Lenora Bell, and much like I felt about Beverly Jenkins, I will definitely be continuing to read her books. The last historical romance I want to talk about is one that is a reread for me, and it finally completes a reread that I started early on in the year. This historical romance is On the Way to the Wedding by Julia Quinn, which is the 8th and final book in the Bridgerton series. I mentioned rereading the series before because I was so excited about the fact that Shondaland and Netflix are adapting it. On the Way to the Wedding is about the youngest brother, Gregory, and he, of course, having been surrounded by all his siblings and watched them all fall in love, he believes that true love exists, and he's holding out for that. And one day he meets a woman named Hermione, and he thinks that she is the one that he's meant to be with. In order to win her over, he teams up with her best friend Lucy to, you know, get himself ingratiated with Hermione, only to maybe discover that Hermione might not be the one for him, and it might just be someone else. You might be able to guess who from that obvious synopsis. But I really enjoyed this one. It's one of those books where I always forget how much I enjoy it until I'm reading it again. I've reread this one so many times. And much like the other Bridgerton books, it's high on the drama. I really liked particularly the relationship between Gregory and Lucy, who are obviously the couple in this book. I think it's fun because you get to see them develop from like strangers into friends, into sort of accomplices, and trying to get her best friend to like him, and then eventually they both realize that, oh, I think I have feelings for the other person. And it's just so cute and wholesome, and as always, the other Bridgertons make appearances in the book, and that's always the highlight of the series for me. Just watching them all get involved in each other's love stories is kind of the greatest thing ever, because it usually means shenanigans. And like the type of shenanigans where like, oh, I don't know, you climb trees and watch windows and stuff like that. So it was very enjoyable. There is a moment in here that I kind of felt was a little off. Not as bad as some of the other moments that have occurred in earlier books in the series, but I just wanted to mention that just in case. But other than that, very enjoyable, very fun, still left me with a smile on my face, and I am so happy that I reread this entire series. The only middle grade in this video, and the only one I've read recently outside of Keeper of the Lost Cities, which is a whole thing on its own. It's a book called Hello Universe, which is by Erin Entrada Kelly. As you can see, it won a Newbery Medal. Lovely. This is actually a Filipino-American author too, which is very exciting. Hello Universe is about 4 kids. So there's Virgil, Valencia, Chet, and Cowrie. And they all happen to live in sort of the same area and neighborhood. Their paths get drawn together when Virgil kind of goes missing in the woods because of an incident, and the other 3 end up getting involved. What I really liked about this one is that it explores the complicated things that you might be feeling growing up, whether it has to do with your family, your own self-esteem, the relationships with other people, how other people treat you. It's a lot, but it's just told in such a way where it feels simple and relatable, and I can see why a lot of kids in particular, and even grown-ups, would find themselves drawn to this story. It echoes a lot of, you know, similar feelings and experiences that you might have had. I definitely had some of them when I was younger. And I like that the overall message is, you know, the importance of the relationships you create when you're young, the importance of understanding how valuable other people can be, and how you never really know what's going on with someone else until you find out from that someone else, whether directly or indirectly. Yeah. And it's just nice because it's so heartwarming to see friendships in books, and I really like that about this one. So definitely an enjoyable book. The last thing I'm going to talk about in this section was a reread, and I'm just going to group them all together because they basically belong together. And it's the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th book in the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants series. So it's the second summer of the Sisterhood, the Girls in Pants, and Forever in Blue. I will say I think the second summer of the Sisterhood may be my least favorite, whereas Girls in Pants is my favorite. I already talked about the first book before, but to summarize, it is about 4 best friends, Lena, Tibby, Bea, and Carmen, and every summer they usually end up separated for some reason or the other. And the thing that has tied them together for the 4 years in these books is that they have this pair of genes that magically fits all of them, even with their different shapes and sizes body-wise. Each book chronicles a different summer and different things are going on for these characters. I really have such a nostalgic love for the series. I think I'm always going to be drawn to it for the fact that I was obsessed with their friendship growing up, and I loved like the fact that they had so much history together. They've been friends since they were babies. Like they have that history.
Yeah, so cute.
And I love that kind of story. I also really like that it sort of chronicles each one of them going through their individual struggles. They have very different family situations, they have different aspirations, they very different personalities too. And all of those things kind of meld together with whatever summer circumstance they're in to give them a moment of growing up and like coming to terms with things. And I really appreciated that about every single one of these books. Did I always think the plots were great? Not so. Sometimes they felt a little too over the top or a little too romance focused, which wasn't necessarily my favorite. I also thought that sometimes there were things that I don't find were particularly handled well, especially in this book. There are a couple of particular events where I'm just like, huh, I don't remember it being quite like that. Overall, it was just nice to revisit the series. Rachel from Hello Charlie and I basically read all 3 of these together and it was fun. I am very much looking forward to watching the movies because I also really enjoyed those adaptations. I will say the one thing that surprised me was that my favorite character changed. I used to love Lena. Lena was like my favorite of all. While I still had some moments where I really felt like, oh, she's great, she's actually not my favorite anymore. My favorite actually is Carmen, which is surprising to me because she used to be like one of the people where I'm like, I don't think we would get along, but I actually enjoyed her stories the most. And B follows pretty close behind, even though there were like a few parts where I'm kind of like, I don't know how I feel about that. It was very interesting just to see how my taste changed, and I wouldn't be surprised if I read it again like years later it would change again. So still recommend the series with the caveat that it's definitely got some things that didn't age well. Really fun, and if you just would rather watch the movies, you could do that too. I have completed my first half. What have you been reading lately?
We're gonna do a speed round because I feel like that'll cover it, and plus, you know, a nice little break from the real book reviews. No, that's not true. I'm reviewing some books too.
I think legitimately just sharing your thoughts is already a real book review,
yeah.
so.
It's just I wish I had more. Superwoman, Superwoman.
In that case,
Rebirth, Volume 2. A couple of what we read ago, I read the Superwoman, where we have, without getting into too much spoilers for those of you who even want to pick it up, 2 Superwomen, almost hearkening to the days of after Clark died and then came back to life, and then suddenly there were 2 Supermen, Superman Blue and Superman Red.
oh right,
Which was
yes,
so bizarre, and then he just, like, whatever, right? So there was that like brief era where that happened. It was sort of almost a throwback to that, only this time you had a Superwoman that had the, you know, the costume and the, you know, little, I'm like, whatever, no mask, and then you had like an all red powered kind of, you know, I am power incarnate Kryptonian kind of Superwoman.
I don't know how I feel about that.
While the draw of 1 was just sort of like, who is Superwoman, right? So that was sort of like the mystery of it, and how it subverted the trope of who was she by just doing some crazy plot twist midway, and you're like, I thought we were supposed to, how come?
And you're like, oh, I guess not.
And it sort of left me wanting more.
Okay.
Hence me delving into Superwoman Rebirth Volume 2. I gotta say, it sort of subverted the storyline once again.
In a good way? Or in a...
You ever go to a restaurant, you order something, and you think that it's a thing that you ordered, and then you bite into it, and you're like, oh, that's not what that's supposed to... I mean, but it's not bad that you want to send it back or not touch it, but you're still eating it, and you're like, you're getting full, but you're not happy. But there's a level of satisfaction. That's the experience. It's not bad. It fills you up. It just, you're like, is that what we really bargained for? And it wasn't for me personally. I don't know that this was a huge hit because I don't Google that kind of stuff. I did not expect them to take it there in that direction. I did not expect them to have the character development go from, I'm trying to figure out my place in the world as a new superhero, to, but we're gonna do it this way, which is totally unexpected. And they were building it up to go here, where, what am I without my powers? And they're like, but here's what actually did happen to your powers. And then,
so extreme U-turn.
Or
extreme turn.
It's one of those, it's like you get lost on like the Cloverleaf thing, and then you ended up on your exit anyway, but you're like, why did we, was there a fairy that magicked our like path to be longer? And there was that weird hot dog stand on the side. It was that, you know, it's that weird. It is that weird. They bring characters that you are familiar to the TV series, so if you do watch Supergirl, I mean, you've got a couple of characters from the Supergirl series that are in here, not that Supergirl is in this, but then you're like, oh, I know how, oh dear, that's what they did to you here, good gore. So it's just, whatever.
This sounds like a very fascinating but odd mix of things.
It was. It's bizarre. As opposed to the absolute bizarreness of what could only be called the Marvel The End series of comics. And they've done this before to several sort of titles. So you've got X-Men The End, you've got Wolverine, where basically it's almost kind of like the DC Elseworlds concept, where let's take an existing character and storyline
and then put them in some other...
and put them at the end. Like, this is what happens to them at the end of their life, or so some of the characters are very old.
Bold of them to assume there's only one like that.
So yeah, so I guess in that particular multiverse, this is the end. And there were about 5 that just recently came out 6 months ago. Hey, Marvel Unlimited. Shout out to you. Shout out to you. Party like it 6 months ago. So Doctor Strange, Miles Morales, Deadpool, Venom, and Captain Marvel. Now, speed round. What I loved about absolutely all of these The End comics is where they took them. Doctor Strange was at a place where magic has dwindled to almost nothing, and he's the last Sorcerer Supreme in a long time. Nobody has succeeded him. Magic is particularly gone, and he's stuck to parlor tricks and such. And he's
seems so
like he's reduced to the kind of tarot card reading that you know that you find on the street that is common in the sense. I don't want to, like, this is not a thing against tarot card readers. I'm just saying common in terms of you will find them on a regular basis. There's nothing uber mysterious or mystical about the Sorcerer Supreme anymore. I didn't like at first that they sort of brought it down to that downgrade, I guess, in terms of like power. So now he's just like a side mystic. But then it segues into and of course the end is all about the end. And so when you finally do get to the ending, there's a poignancy to it, and that's what they have. Nice. All of them. It brings the story to a close, because chances are these The End comics end up with the people either dead or riding off into the sunset. I won't spoil as to who or what, but there's a poignancy to Doctor Strange's ending. Carol's story, and I say that
Carol
like
is Captain Marvel.
I say that like we're friends.
I also say that to clarify for those of you who are like me and very, very like new to comics or only know basic things about them.
Yeah, it's like I call Doctor Strange like I don't call him like Steven. Like that's just there's no.
You're not that kind of friend.
No, but I have read
Carol on the other.
But I have read enough Captain Marvel. I've seen her like through all of the stuff, and I'm just like, girl, what are you doing? I may as well be like Jessica Drew or like. One of her Rogue, one of her like contemporaries. But Carol's was I mean, they capitalized on the movie Captain Marvel, where she's like all the way in space. She goes back home, and it's just this terrible devastation. And there's only one way that Captain Marvel can save the day, and she does, and it is poignant and beautiful and oh boy, so highly emotional. So there's that. Venom's a little weird. They capitalized on the Venomverse. I have a symbiote across.
Okay.
I'm a symbiote. Right. I have bonded with 20 bajillion like superheroes and people and everything.
Very odd.
And so they capitalized on that, and that factored into the end credits. So that was, I guess, the weirdest of the bunch. But I will admire the storytelling of this. If you do want to pick up Venom the End, it is because it is told in sort of like third-person narrative, talking about. So it's a lot of just text boxes and very little dialogue. And it's a lot of pictures and events, and this led to this, and this led to that. So it's like the weirdest bedtime story.
But it kind of makes sense for Venom, I think.
We are Venom.
Yeah, that's why I think it makes sense.
So to have their story told, because there is no one singular perspective, because we are Venom, you know what I mean? So so Alexa's got a great, like, I didn't even see that. I'm like, oh,
it makes sense for Venom. So.
Anyway, speaking of spiders, so Miles, right? Again,
Miles.
dystopia.
Is he older?
Oh, he's definitely older. Like old man Miles, like he's, and he's mayor.
That just made me think of Wolverine.
And he's mayor of the last like living like town that sort of works, and he's sort of towing the line. It's nostalgic, but it falls a little flat for me personally, because like of course they would end it that way.
So this one was the most you expected it to be.
Yeah, there was an anticlimax to it that was a little bit on the nose for me, because in the tradition of anyone who wears the spider mantle, of course you're gonna be a big damn hero. Of course it's gonna be with great power comes great responsibility. Only it's not that nose, it's the other nose of I'm a superhero and it's all on me. So no hate at all. It's just for me, I was expecting, we could have fireworks, but all right, a nice little glow.
So we're back to the whole analogy of your restaurant.
A nice little glow. Well, no, this one's the better. This one's the dessert that came afterwards that wasn't exactly tiramisu, but then I guess the mascarpone was fine, and then it sort of pads it out.
I like this analogy. That's why we're gonna roll with it.
Sounds like it sounds like I ate 5 things at a restaurant, and like 2 of them were like, all right, and then the rest were like, so we're good. Which leads me to, I would say, the strangest of them all, but also the most on brand, and of course it's Deadpool. Deadpool can do anything, and you'll be like, yeah, sure.
There's a freedom in that, I think.
But what I did like about this was Deadpool tries to kill Death because he doesn't want his daughter to die, and his daughter's like 91.
Weirdly wholesome.
And he can't. He just can't. And the kids just. And the entire thing is just him allowing himself to let go, because his daughter doesn't have his healing factor, and he has lived for ages.
That's actually a nice story.
And so Wade
sad, but nice.
Exactly. So that's why it's the weirdest, but at the same time, it's like, oh, it went for a decent curve, aside from the usual tomfoolery and shenanigans. So if you are a Deadpool fan, I don't know what you'll think about this one, but it is a story about a father and a daughter. I don't know, like every time I see a Deadpool anything, it's Ryan Reynolds' voice that I hear in my head.
Actually,
so
me too.
if you're a Ryan Reynolds fan,
he really inhabited that character so
he
well.
kind of is the like I don't know, like some weird kind of Deadpoolception here, where whoever was writing Deadpool was channeling a future Ryan Reynolds.
Yep, basically.
And you just can't separate the two anymore. Like there's just no. It's kind of like how Robert Downey Jr. will forever be the best version of Iron Man. Anyway, so that's pretty much that. I said speed round, but I guess it's a little slow over here.
Speed round with a turtle.
Speed round with a turtle. Yes, very very fast.
Now that we're back to me, I have a couple more books to talk about. So the first book I have to talk about right now is The Vanishing Half, which is by Britt Bennett. I read this one for our July book club with my sisters and my cousin, Carmela, Rachel, and Mel. Anyway, The Vanishing Half is about two twin sisters who are basically best friends who are inseparable as children. They live in a town where fairer, lighter skin is sort of prized. They're both black. So these two twins are inseparable. As teens, they both suddenly, randomly run away from home and they make lives for themselves. And then a few years later, one of the twins comes back to the small town and she has her daughter with her. Ooh. And the other twin has no longer been seen or heard from ever again. And their lives have diverged. So the twin that comes back, she actually got married to someone black and her daughter has much darker skin, where the twin who left and never returned, she has been passing herself off as white. That's pretty much the heart of the story. It's one of those books where it's better to read it with other people because then you can discuss all of the things that you might have noticed or not noticed about the story, which I think was the most beneficial thing about reading it with my sisters and my cousin. I think we had a great discussion about it. It was really eye-opening and really interesting. The writing and the narrative style and even the choice that the author made to sort of jump around in the timeline and use 4 different perspectives, so the two twin sisters and their 2 daughters. It was a smart call. I think it made the story more interesting. It never had a dull moment for me where I was like, oh, I'm not really interested in that character or their arc. I thought all of these women were interesting and complex and they each had their own thing that they were sort of dealing with, and I like that a lot. I am a big character-driven reader, so it's always fascinating to me when an author captures the complexities of like human nature in a character, and I think Britt Bennett did that very, very well in this book. I will say, if you're the kind of person who doesn't really like stories that feel like only a snapshot of character lives, you might not enjoy this one as much overall, because that's what it essentially is. It shows you snapshots of every single one of those perspectives. Like, you only see certain highlights and low moments in their lives. You don't really get like a full-on plot-driven, this is what happened when I was 16, when I was 17. It's not like that. It's more like, this is the one significant moment in that year, and that's all you're really gonna get. Plus, the ending is also very open-ended because, again, snapshot, slice of life. You're really just meant to encounter these characters, to question and to, you know, mull over the choices they make and to like sort of try to understand the different perspectives they're taking, and I think that is what makes this book so fascinating to read. So I definitely thought it was a thought-provoking read and would recommend it, especially if you are looking for something to read for like a book club. Sort of a departure in tone, we're going to talk about a recent release, Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. This is the 3rd Fredrik Backman novel, although 4th of his work, that I have read, and it pretty much plays out exactly like I expected. Backman's novels always start off with having pretty like out there synopsis. The synopsis of this one in particular, it's about a would-be bank robber who ends up holding people hostage, and these people have all gone to like see an apartment. That's the scenario at the beginning of the book, but the book is not even just about that. It actually traces the stories of each of the characters that involved, from the bank robber to every single individual that has been taken hostage, how they got to the apartment viewing and that moment, and what happens after. Again, because I'm a character-driven reader, this was the kind of story that I was just like, all right, I'm here for the ride. Plus, with my experience with Backman's writing, his characters always seem to be like a little out there. They're never exactly what you expect them to be. Much like Britt Bennett, he really has a way of capturing the nuances and complexities of different people. They're not all likable characters, and yet somehow I was still like, oh, I want to know about you. It feels like they're real people, and I think that's a gift when you're a writer, right? Like, to make your characters sort of pop off the page and to invite the reader to get so drawn into their stories that they just keep on reading. He manages to intertwine some themes that I didn't really like expect him to. There was stuff about mortality, there was stuff about life and adulthood and being an adult and relationships with other people, and he does it in a way where it's like, it just feels clever because it's just woven in there and you're like, huh, That's what I think.
A lot.
That's how I feel too. Like that's how it comes across, and I really like that a lot about his work. I will say this isn't the easiest book to read either, because I mean the characters, first of all, like I already said, they're not all immediately likable, and some of them you have to work to actively like look past the things that make them unlikable.
Right.
And then the story itself isn't a linear narrative, so it kind of jumps all around in terms of timeline and character perspectives and structure, and I know that doesn't work for some people. I was fine with it. There's also a lot of difficult content in it. There's suicide, there's depression, addiction, death of loved ones, and those are things I know a lot of people might struggle with as well, so I hope that you consider those warnings before you pick it up. But personally, I'm happy to have read another Bachman. I really am impressed still by the quality of his work, especially because it's translated work. Like the translator also does a really good job like conveying whatever Bachman was trying to convey, and I also appreciate that a lot. And one last thing, I listened to this on audiobook thanks to Libro FM. If you're an audiobook person, definitely check out Libro FM so you can support local bookstores. I really enjoyed the narration. I don't often listen to new releases on audiobook because sometimes I struggle with narrators, especially ones I don't know, but in this case, the narrator was great, thought it was excellent, so definitely keep that in mind. The next book is also a relatively new release, and that's Crazy Stupid Bromance by Alyssa K. Adams, which is the third in the Bromance book club series. This one is about characters we've actually met in the second book, Alexis, who owns a cat cafe, and she also happens to sort of now have become a symbol for a haven for women who have suffered from some sort of emotional or sexual abuse. Her best friend Noah, who is this like hacktivist who has kind of gone on the straight and narrow. The thing is, they've both been in love with each other for so long, but they don't want to tell each other because they don't want to ruin their friendship.
Sure.
There is a girl who shows up at the cat cafe who kind of reveals that she is Alexis's sister, and that she needs Alexis to do something pretty big. It also kind of takes off when the gentlemen in the Bromance book club convince Noah that he should tell Alexis how he's feeling, you know, just to see if things could happen, especially because everyone knows that they like each other. I thought it was cute. It's not my favorite of the series. I still think that honor goes to the second book, but much like the other books, it was just a good time, you know? I am not always like a big fan of like the friends to lovers thing. I appreciate it because it's always great to have that foundation of friendship and trust, right? But it's not always my favorite to read. Alyssa K. Adams just has a gift for like romantic banter and building up tension. I really enjoyed like the other details that colored the story. Like there is a wedding going on in the background, there's Alexis in her cat cafe, there is the individual journeys both Alexis and Noah have to take because they have things that they need to deal with respectively before they can even consider being in any sort of relationship. If you have enjoyed the other books in the series, you'll definitely enjoy this one, I think, because there's no way you wouldn't enjoy getting to see the entirety of the Bromance book club again and seeing this romance blossom. So I would check it out if you're a fan of the series. Still not my favorite though. 3 more books and then I swear I'm done. So the first one is Secret Crush Seduction, which is by J.C. Lee. This is the second book in the Heirs of Hansel series, and this is under the Harlequin Desire line. So this book should have been my thing, and I did enjoy it, although I didn't love it as much as I thought. It should be my thing because the entire plot is basically a girl who falls in love with her brother's best friend. Adelaide Song kind of wants to prove herself to her grandmother that she can, you know, take over the corporation that her grandmother owns, except that she's kind of gotten a reputation for being like a flighty wild child, so it's gonna take a lot for her to prove that. And in order to do so, she is going to be doing this project, and she requires the help of her brother's best friend Michael. Of course, while they're working together in this project, sparks fly. I enjoyed it overall. The reason why I didn't love it as much as I wanted to was because it was so short, and I feel like everything just happened in fast forward because it was so short. I would have liked a little more time with like the angsty part of it where they can't be together because of circumstances, but I would have also liked a little more time where they're like getting to know each other again and falling in love again, or like realizing they have feelings for each other. Would have been nice. But I will say it was fun to read because not only does it have the trope that I love, it also has the backdrop of the Song family. I just really enjoy that. I don't know why. I also like that Adelaide is a fashion designer and the project she's handling is a fashion show, and that like side plot was really fun too.
Yeah, that works.
So yeah, I liked it. It was fun to read. It was so quick to read because it was so short. And I actually do want to read the other books in the series, though I will go into them with the expectation that they will be a little shorter and perhaps less developed in terms of the characters and relationships than I would like them to be. The next one is Dating Makes Perfect by Pin Tip Dunn. This is a YA contemporary that came out a couple of months ago. Fake dating trope. That is the main thing in this one. The Tech sisters, there are 2 older sisters, they're twins, and then there's the younger sister. They're all not technically allowed to date. But when the 2 older ones go to college and then their parents suddenly are like, so where's your boyfriend? Like, are you gonna get engaged
Classic
to like a
as
proper Thai American dude?
Yeah.
And the sisters are like, well, no, not really dating. You know, they're like, they decide that the youngest sister, Winnie, needs to get experience dating while she's in high school. And so they set Winnie up with the guy that they think is going to be the perfect fit for her, except that Winnie actually is interested in someone else. And this guy happens to be her former best friend who is no longer her best friend.
Also
it's a bunch of tropes, yeah. It's a bunch of tropes. I thought it was darling. I like that there's a big family aspect to the story. I like the relationship with the parents because it was complicated, but it was also like a lot of just misunderstanding that eventually gets ironed out. But I also especially loved Winnie's relationship with her older sisters. Like, I love their bond so much, and I like that none of them are competitive with each other or mean to each other. They're always there for the others. I think that's just sweet. I also think, obviously, that the romance was really cute. I did say that I am not much for friends to lovers romances, but the fact that in this one they were ex-friends who are sort of antagonistic towards one another, and then they eventually realize that it was all just a big misunderstanding. Like, I'm a sucker for that kind of thing. The whole concept of these fake dates, especially the actual dates that they go on, very cute, very adorable. This was also another quick read. Definitely one that I enjoyed. And last, but certainly not least, is Shine by Jessica Jung. It's the first in a, I think it's a duology. It's the first in a duology, and it is about a girl named Rachel who has spent quite a few years of her life getting ready to be a part of the K-pop world. She wants to debut as a K-pop star. It's been her dream since she was little, and her entire family actually uprooted from where they lived in New York to go to Korea so that she could be trained by one of the, I guess, companies that sort of puts these groups and K-pop stars together and trains them and all of that. Rachel in this book is sort of grappling with whether or not that's really what she wants for her future. At the same time, she's being exposed to sort of the highs and the lows of being a part of the K-pop world, because she gets the opportunity to meet and then collaborate with an already well-known K-pop male star. Things kind of escalate from there. So there's high stakes, high drama. There's also a lot of surprisingly thoughtful sort of grappling with the future, who she is as a person, what she really wants, the length she is willing to go. There's also a lot of relationships in this book that I wasn't expecting, particularly the ones with her family, especially her younger sister. What I like about this book is that it sort of gives you a bird's eye view, I guess, into the world of K-pop. I am not personally very familiar with it. I'm only very peripherally familiar with K-pop and the people involved. I actually only know Jessica Jung was a member of Girls' Generation because of one of my roommates who loved Girls' Generation back in the day. It was fascinating. It almost felt autobiographical in some places, because I feel like you had to have gone through some of these things to be able to write about them in a way that felt so effective. Rachel's experiences gave me a lot of secondhand anxiety and embarrassment sometimes. They also gave me like that whole rush of like someone getting to see their dream come to life in even just the smallest of ways.
Yeah, that's
and
kinda
that
cool.
was what really kept me turning the pages. There was a little bit of whiplash sometimes with how quickly things would like turn around and like the events, and then there would be some pretty typical like YA tropes in books with like the mean girl thing and like all of the friendship drama that ensues. But overall, I thought it was really enjoyable. I thought it was really interesting. I think I will be checking out the second one. I won't probably rush to pick it up, but I am curious to see how Rachel's story continues, and if that's going to be the end of it as well. I'm curious to see how she wraps it all up and whether she decides what she's gonna do about her K-pop dreams.
All right.
Anyway, those are all the books that we're gonna talk about in today's What We Read. We hope you enjoyed watching this video, even though it ended up way longer than I thought it was gonna be.
Way longer.
You guys should let us know what you've been reading lately. We would love to hear, and we will see you guys with another video soon. Bye!